Okay, so we are live. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another edition of Let's Talk China with me and the old man.
Good morning.
Let us know where you're coming in from. Good morning, good afternoon. 1 second, little technical fault. Just pause the video.
Yeah, okay, go on.
We just got too carried away watching our own videos, and I'm joking. So, yeah, let us know where you're all coming in from. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. If any of you are coming in from Europe, make sure to let us know, because we know this time is obviously not so good for the European time zones. Unfortunately, we can't cater for everybody. So big appreciation if any of you are coming in from there. Let us know where you are watching from. It is 10 a.m. here in China. Lovely day outside.
It's starting to get towards summer. It's getting warmer and warmer every day, isn't it?
I'm already too warm, sat here at 10 a.m. and luckily we're able to go outside, because for a lot of people, they're not able to go outside. We've just had a comment from Samantha Jenkins saying sharp picture. That's what we want to hear.
Oh, good. Good morning, Samantha.
Third time lucky. We've been having technical issues with the quality, so hopefully
finally got it sorted.
Hopefully the audio and the picture is good today. Let us know if you do have any problems. Greetings from Vancouver, Canada. Okay, so what we're kicking it off with today, Big Lee? What we're talking about?
Okay, so first of all, I just want to go back to something we spoke about last week, which was the situation with Africans in Guangzhou. So some more sort of things have come to light, and what had happened. Initially, people thought they were being racist because they were targeting Africans, although I think there is a little bit of that. It all stemmed from that. An African had come back into the country and found to have tested positive. And what had happened, another African within Guangzhou, or it was the woman that had come back, she owned a restaurant, an African restaurant within Guangzhou. And after some investigation, the authorities said, look, it's pretty much only African people that go to this restaurant.
Right.
So they wanted to do the contact tracing of all the people this restaurant owner had come into contact with. So it was basically all the people that had gone to her restaurant over the last number of days or week or so. But obviously, because it was a African food restaurant, it was only pretty much, predominantly Africans that go there.
Right.
So when they started contact tracing all these Africans, obviously other people said, oh, you're only targeting Africans, but they were only looking for the people who'd been to that restaurant. But I also think on top of that, the Guangdong authorities got a bit sort of overzealous.
Yeah, over anxious about it. And went a bit too far.
A bit over anxious about it and went a bit too far. And I think after the consulates of a number of the embassies of a number of African countries intervened, the government sort of kind of apologized, although they didn't make a formal apology. They did. Some of these people they'd rounded up that had previously tested negative, they let them back out of quarantine, and they sort of gave them some flowers and some gifts. Now, okay, that doesn't excuse what they've done, but they obviously realized the error. But this sort of thing where they say, oh, they're only targeting Africans, was simply because of the restaurant situation, that only Africans had gone there. Chinese people don't go there. So it looked in the community as that they were only targeting Africans, where in effect they were just tracing the people that this woman had come into contact with.
I think that's definitely a valid point. I'm doing a video about this discrimination issue at the moment. I'm planning it, and it's not something I want to jump into because it's something I want to make sure I can, a week later, I can stand behind my words and say, yeah, that is what I said, and I don't regret it, or I've looked into it, I've done my due diligence. And when I was thinking about it more, my main issue with the whole thing is like the collateral damage that it causes.
Sure, because especially Africans do a huge amount of business in China, especially in Guangzhou. That's why there's such a large community there, because there is, and I think that's why once it had been escalated, and the African embassies got involved. As I said last week, it's very easy sometimes to see clips of video and they're taken completely out of context. So I think you have to look at the bigger picture
Yeah, that is easy to do. And
because at that time last week, nothing was said about this restaurant and this woman who tested positive, who was a restaurant owner and then had contact with her. Nothing was said about that. That's come to light since it was investigated, you see.
Yeah. And obviously, this is the thing. There's a really fine balance where this is quite hard to lay out. But if, for example, there's statistically a certain amount of people are, let's say infected in this case, subconsciously you're more likely to target that specific group of people, even though that is going to cause collateral damage. And
that was especially so because the restaurant, they interviewed the woman. She says, look, I don't have Chinese customers. All my customers are Africans because I cook African food. So obviously all the people they're going to trace are going to be Africans. But it looked from outsiders that they were targeting Africans, where actually they were just doing contact tracing. And I believe there was a number sort of somewhere between 10 and 15 who were actually found to have tested positive.
Yeah, that is the case. But when there are time and time again, I've seen stories pop into groups, and ones that you can actually verify because they've given you all the details. They've said, this is the case. Obviously, there is a chance that they could be lying, but a lot of the things I like to take with a pinch of salt. Like you said, some clips can be misconstrued to be, because they have no context, some online clips. But there are some things that you think, oh, okay, I've read that, and that is definitely the case. And sure. that is really disheartening to see. One thing that I've seen like the last couple of days was it was a guy who'd posted to Reddit, and he owns a pizza store, a pizza little branch in Shenzhen and in Guangzhou. And in the Guangzhou branch, the authorities came in and said, you must not let foreigners in, especially black residents. And he quoted that and said that is quoted exactly what they said. And he went on to say, blah, 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 I've been brought up in a society of parents, teachers, etc., that is, totally racially inclusive. And I want to politely say, F off to the police, because even if they shut us down for that, I'm willing to take that hit, because I'm not going to exclude foreigners, especially black people, from my restaurants. So this is the collateral damage that it's causing. And when you see, when it goes on to the media, especially, especially a lot of the more undereducated people, uncivilized kind of people, they just take these things for face value and think they see one thing that says, oh, all black people are infected, and they just think, yeah, that must be true. And then just their actions to the world are that black people are infected, everyone else is okay.
I think something else that plays into it as well is there's a couple of things I would mention. First of all, because of how big China is, a lot of so the central government will make a policy, but then it's interpreted differently by different regions. So again, it will very much depend on like Guangzhou, obviously the sort of chief who's implementing things there might interpret it slightly differently. It seems Guangzhou did interpret it, or maybe Guangdong even, but I've not seen so much problems in Shenzhen. Obviously, we're white skinned, so that might make a difference here in Shenzhen. I've not. I did notice one thing, like I sometimes go to the shopping center with my partner and they just take my temperature. When we went together, they made us do a little bit more. They made us show the code. He took a photo of our codes and that, didn't he? Because we weren't with a Chinese person, and that might make a difference. So that's one thing that sort of plays into it. I think, go on.
Just adding on to that is that it seems to be that if you have someone who's Chinese with you, they can talk to the security and level things out really easily, and you get allowed in. But it's definitely different when you're not with a Chinese person.
Sure, that's obviously down to a communication issue. And the other thing I think that plays into it, for the last few months since the COVID-19 started, there's been a lot of Chinese who've been subjected to a lot of abuse abroad.
Yeah.
And obviously that spreads like wildfire on Chinese social media.
Yeah, probably
go,
even more so.
Look at these horrible foreigners that they're treating Chinese.
Yeah.
And almost a sense, it's like that fuels up their thinking of,
it's okay,
although it's totally wrong, but they see foreigners doing it to Chinese people, so they think, we'll do it back. Yeah, and obviously two wrongs don't make a right, but that's just what happens, you know. And
I've actually heard people say that, and I've heard that argument that because it happened abroad, that's justifiable to do it back. Yeah, I mean,
it of course it's not justifiable, but to a point you can understand it, because for years and years, you know, you look at the UK, you look at America, they're very racially diverse societies, where China's not anywhere near as racially diverse. So it's kind of a bit of a more of a new thing, and that's not an excuse, but that's how society evolved. That's how it's come to happen. You know, one day say, I mean, I've got a few Chinese friends back in the UK, and we actually had a comment on one of our videos, and this guy says, like, he's lived abroad for many years. It's almost like a daily basis he gets kind of like abuse sort of thing, you know, people running down his country, or people, you know, you eat bats, you eat dogs, you eat cats, all this kind of thing all the time. So to a point, I can understand. It's almost like, we want to get our own back, although that's completely wrong. It's just the way human behavior is. It's like an eye for an eye kind of thinking.
Excuse me. I think one thing that is massively different, however, there is something that's gonna go against my argument here. In the UK, for example, you've got citizens that are just horrible people that are going to shout abuse and say things to Chinese people or whatever. That's always going to happen in every nation, because you've got, you know, bad actors.
Yeah.
I think the main difference is when it's things that are handed down by authority, rather than, because say, for example, in the UK, look, correct me if I'm wrong, but I did not hear any Chinese people not being allowed to do the same things as citizens by
it's come more from the authorities here than the people.
And that is definitely, in my opinion, that is a bigger problem, because
absolutely,
of course you're going to get bad actors. That happens everywhere. There's horrible people, but your society reflects the morals and reflects the government and what they put into place, the orders they put into place. So doing things like that is going to make the citizens discriminate more, in my opinion, other than the ones that are really, you know, level-minded and say, no, that's wrong.
Yeah.
But the people who might just not think about it as much, they're going to sort of reflect what the government are telling them.
That's right. Yeah.
However, my thing to oppose that was America did, at the start of this, they did cancel all entry from Chinese citizens.
They did, yes.
And that was even if they hadn't even been to China.
Yeah,
recently.
that's right. Yeah.
So therefore, I could have flown from, you know, China to America, but a Chinese resident who was living in Canada couldn't have gone into America.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So that's exactly the same.
It is. Yeah, that was discriminatory against
that is
just Chinese people.
Yeah. So obviously, it's not just happening here. However, it is I mean, widespread.
But as I say, I think the thing to take away is you have to get the whole context, and I think that is part of it here. But I do think the certainly Guangdong authorities have been a bit overzealous with targeting African people. So another thing I'd like to talk about, I've seen it come up on our sort of discussion boards that it seems Westerners seem to think there's a second wave of infection happening in China, and that it's been hushed. Certainly in Shenzhen, I've noticed that people are becoming more relaxed.
Definitely. In the last couple of weeks, massively.
Yeah. And I see that there's still a lot of things there. There's still a lot of temperature taking, but things have relaxed a little, which is a good thing. But I think you've got to be careful not to relax too much, because I think if you watch the numbers, Heilongjiang, up on the top border, they're recording quite a lot of cases, and that's from both Chinese nationals and foreign citizens coming in, because they have a massive land border there. I believe it's with sort of Russia. They can't police all that border, so people are thinking, oh, instead of going through like a proper port and I've got to be quarantined, I'll just sneak in through the land border.
Right.
So they've sort of locked down parts of that province again, because the infection rate was starting to spike because they had people coming across the border. But I think on the whole, I don't see that there's a second wave going on. I mean, it doesn't appear.
It doesn't appear to be that case. And to be honest, I can't see any reason why they'd still be allowing things to get more relaxed if that was the case.
Yeah, that's right.
It seems that any sort of spike, they're just going to go 100% lockdown straight away, because that they obviously saw that work the first time. So to think that they would try and leave it as relaxed as possible a second time just doesn't seem logical.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense, and there's also sort of things about that in comments, and I think it was released in the news a day or so ago, that and the West obviously will jump on this saying, oh, China lied, but they've recalculated the death rates within Hubei and Wuhan, and it's apparently increased by about 50%. But what they've done is they've included now all the people that died, that they assessed when they died at home or in places other than hospitals. And obviously the Western media will jump all over that, saying, oh, look, China lied. But actually, I think by doing that, it shows they're actually being more transparent about the situation, weeks and weeks after. Now that the sort of it's calmed down a bit and they've got a bit more time to think. Like initially, they're obviously just concerned with sorting out the problem they've got with the overloaded hospitals and that, so you can't get. And it's the same now in the UK. The UK government apparently not reporting deaths in nursing homes.
This is the thing. Every country is reporting it so differently. And every country, there was new studies come out recently that said there could be, I can't remember the exact percentage, but it was a hell of a lot more people could have it without having any symptoms at all, which would mean that it would drastically decrease the fatality rate, and it would increase the amount of spreaders and increase the amount of overall people that have got it. So you could say really that every country is lying, or you could say that every country doesn't know.
Yeah, I think it's more of a case of that it doesn't know. And I think at a time where you're at the peak and you're trying to do your best to save as many people as possible, I think the last thing on your mind is producing figures. So, everybody else around the world knows how many people have died. I think actually that's not the highest priority. Now, this leads into something that I find unbelievable. If you look at now the countries that are suffering the most, so you look at the USA and to a large extent now the UK, it's like they're the two countries. So you've got other European countries, but if you contrast the UK with Germany, right? So the UK are now up to 16,000 deaths. I've no idea how many cases now, but it's a lot. All of a sudden, there's this massive news media. Let's shift the blame to China. Whereas if you look at Germany, and the same with the USA, it's like, it almost feels to me like they failed to contain it because they haven't followed the procedures. It seems to me the USA and the UK were the most lax in following what the WHO was telling them. And they are looking to be the two countries that are going to have the worst numbers, obviously. But if you contrast that with Germany, who obviously took notice of what the WHO was saying, and sort of massive testing program, test, isolate. their numbers are way different to the US and the UK. And yet their government are not throwing so much slander at China as the UK. I feel, I mean, I look at the press conferences that are held in the UK, and I think they're a bit of a farce. You know, they have a different minister up there because Boris Johnson's sort of off ill.
Right.
Although great, he's recovering, but he's not doing his normal daily duties. So they have, you know, they take this rota of ministers, and the press keep asking the same questions over and over again, and they fail to answer them every time.
Like, give me an example.
Yeah, so a couple of weeks ago, right, by the end of the month, we're going to have testing up to 100,000 a day. Yeah. We're not anywhere near that. They're currently doing 16, 17, 20,000 a day. You know, they're nowhere near. Why set these targets if you think it's almost like they just want to keep giving these sound bites out. Oh, we're increasing testing, but the figures don't bear that out. And all along from the beginning of January, the WHO kept saying test, trace, isolate, test, trace, isolate. This is what will stop the spread. We see exactly what they did here, exactly what they did in South Korea, exactly what they did in Taiwan, and exactly what they did in Germany. The UK, America, no, it's fine, won't bother with that. And look at the numbers now. You know, there's big differences in the numbers.
Yeah, a conversation I had with a friend the other day was he was making an argument that countries were right for blaming China for allowing people to exit the country once they knew about it. And I was saying, look, if you compare it to previous epidemics, let's compare it to H1N1, for example. Let's say when this started happening and they got some data to show that this was spreading person to person. Imagine China said, look, all the borders are closed. Imagine America going, no, obviously you can't do that. You need to let people here, and all the media would be like this draconian dictatorship. They're closing all the borders when all they've got is like it would be like that. And my friend was basically making the argument that China should have closed their borders completely and not let people fly out. But it's not really up to. It shouldn't really be, in my opinion, it shouldn't really be up to that country. It's up to the other countries to stop letting them in. So it's like America didn't, they did decide to stop letting Chinese residents in, but they didn't stop letting people come. But
it's made no difference. And in fact, they're the worst affected country now, even though they banned all travel from China really early on. And that's simply because they didn't follow the procedures early on that the WHO suggested they follow. You know, the countries that have are in a much better position than countries that didn't. And obviously, you know, there's more and more evidence coming to light that the virus could have been spreading even before they identified the first cases in, you know, once your country has one person in and starts community spread, you can close the borders as much as you want. Just one other thing. I read something yesterday that the UK, there's still 100,000 people traveling into the UK a week, no quarantine, no testing.
They just advised to stay at home.
No, they're not even. Well, I don't even know whether
they must be because it's on a lockdown kind of thing.
But there was some other thing as well. If the because apparently North Yorkshire in England, at the time of the lockdown, there was only something like 10 cases, but they gave up on the advice of the WHO in the UK weeks ago. They stopped all testing and tracing.
Right.
Now they've decided they're going to start that again. So, like, if you look at the way they did it in Korea, as soon as somebody tested positive in an area, they traced everybody that had contact. They isolated them all. So it stops the spread in the community. If you don't test and isolate, you have no idea where it is because there's lots of people who don't even have symptoms.
That's the problem.
You know, and I just find it amazing that the UK are probably going to end up with one of the largest death and infection rates in Europe when it could have been so different. And it's simply because they didn't act quick enough.
Yeah, and that's quite.
And what
evident.
I find amazing about it here is that while it was in China, all they did is, oh, look, it's loads worse in China than the government is saying. It's loads worse. So if you knew it was loads worse, why didn't you act? Now it's bad in England and America. All it is, oh, it's China's fault. It's China's fault.
Yeah, quite quickly.
No, it's not China's fault. It's their own fault for not acting. Since the beginning of January, mid to end of January, the WHO have been saying this is bad. This is how you contain it best. Test and isolate.
And countries haven't been doing it.
Countries haven't been doing it, and those are the ones that are worst hit.
Just a shout out to Trevor Norman here. What do you both think of our stupid MPs in the UK believing Trump's lies on companies like Huawei?
I find it incredible, actually, that they and I feel this.
Just a shout out to MWLI 1984 as well. Yeah. Thank you both,
Trevor. I actually think this will be a great excuse for the British government to please the Americans again and actually ban Huawei from the telecoms infrastructure. And what I find amazing about this is that Huawei were massively involved in 4G in America and in the UK. Nothing adverse come of that. Yeah, we have a GCHQ test in place in the UK that test all their kit and look at it. And it's only since 5G's come about that there's this thing. And I honestly don't believe that it's anything to do with national security. I think if you want to look at people spying through telecom networks, you've only got to look at what Edward Snowden uncovered. Cisco and all those. The Americans were found to be massively spying. Now, they were putting backdoors in equipment going all around the world. They were tapping into Angela Merkel's telephone calls. There has never been any evidence to suggest that Huawei have ever done anything wrong in that respect. And I just find it, I think it's an excuse. Personally, I believe that it's jealousy that plays into this. The ridiculous thing that Huawei can't use Google services on their consumer handsets. How is that a national security issue? It just isn't. It's just a case of flipping jealousy, I think.
But they're able to push that narrative to everybody and without critically thinking about it, most of the citizens think, oh, that's fair enough. China it banned the biggest, telecommunications company because of security risk. Oh, well done, America. That's what they think, most of the people.
I personally think it'll end up backfiring, because if you look at it now, do you think, so right now, China tech companies spend a huge amount of money with especially America on chips, on components and stuff like that. So I think now many of the other companies in China are going to be thinking, it could be us next. So they're just going to be more determined to develop their own thing, so they become less reliant on the USA. And ultimately, that'll backfire on them, because all those billions and billions of dollars that China spend on American components won't be being spent. And you're already seeing this, because America have recently America's supply machinery to this Taiwanese company who make the chips for Huawei. And America are now trying to pass a bill to say that, any company that uses this American machinery, we're going to ban them from selling stuff to China made on this machinery. So already Huawei are looking to move production to the Chinese mainland, to companies within the mainland. So it's not only going to hurt American companies, it's now going to hurt other companies around the world. And I think there's going to be a lot of companies all around the world thinking, are we going to be next to feel the wrath of the US if they get jealous that we've got something more advanced than them?
It seems that obviously America have been top dogs for a long time, and with the way that they think about China's leadership, they just can't bear the thought of them sort of overtaking America's economy, which in my opinion, I think they're just preventing the inevitable. It's kind of like the blockbuster Netflix thing, isn't it? It's like they're kind of using all their power to to get people to be against China, but I don't think it's going to work. Yeah. I was talking to a friend yesterday, and he was basically trying to say that he thinks after this virus, you know, the UK and European countries and America are all going to be so annoyed at China for letting this out that China are going to be done for. Yeah. And I was like, it's like the way I like to think of it is the US and China are like Siamese twins that hate each other. It's like they need each other. Like they're not going to.
I mean, I agree that companies should, anything that's strategic. You know, I do find it a bit bizarre that a lot of these countries have been warned for many years that, you know, anytime we could get a pandemic like this, and it could be worse. You know, you imagine if something like Ebola had spread around the world, which has got a much higher mortality rate, it's like 50% or something. So a lot of these countries have known for many years, yet they didn't set up any strategic industries to manufacture protective equipment, to manufacture masks. So I believe, you know, that should be in that country, because what you're seeing now is countries are becoming very protective. So one of the reasons the UK can't get any protective equipment for the NHS workers, there's a big shortage, because all the countries they bought from, not just China, all the countries they bought from are going, we need it ourselves, so we're not going to sell you any. And this just shows you the bit of a farce about the European Union. You know, the European Union is meant to be this sort of organization, we all share the problems, but they haven't. You know, they've most of them, apart from Germany, I believe Germany are helping actually Italy and Spain and France to treat some patients in their hospitals. Right. Not 100% sure of that, but I do believe that that's the case. But actually, China are now exporting a load of medical equipment. Just one funny thing here. So China exports a lot of medical equipment. Straight away, there's countries going, oh, you've sent us faulty stuff. You're sending substandard stuff. That was the headline. Yeah, when you look into that, it was found some of these places, some of these countries had ordered from unlicensed suppliers in China. So the Chinese authority says, right, okay, what we're going to do, we're going to implement a strict customs regime now. So every export, I'm not talking about like 10 face masks in a DHL barrel. I'm talking about like large shipments to countries. Right, we're gonna inspect these much more thoroughly before they leave China, to make sure that they've come from factories that are licensed and that, because like anywhere, you'll get factories who set up, they're making substances because they think they can make a bit of money quickly. You know, people without morals. So what happens is, so this is probably adding a day or two to stuff shipping. So now America slate China. These new regulations are holding up the shipments of stuff. So China are in a no-win situation. They don't put in the controls, and America bashes them, and other countries bash them for shipping substandard stuff. So they put the controls in to monitor the standards, and now it's holding up supplies because these countries are so short. So, you know, they're damned if they do, they're damned if they don't. And this is always seems to be the case with anything China related, you know.
Just a shout out to Mount Kailash. Thank you for your super sticker there. Something I just want to, I've lost my train of thought now. Where was I? I've completely lost my train of thought. I was going to say about how countries, like I was going on to your point about countries should have a strategic sort of production in their own country. I think this will really make countries sort of, I hope so anyway, make them rethink the way things are done, because our way of living now in such a advanced world, we're all born into it and think it's forever. But we forget that the world, you can have pandemics, you can have super volcanoes erupt, you can have all sorts of things happen to devastate economies and things like this. But we don't really think about those things. Obviously, people have been saying there can be a experts have been saying there can be a pandemic for years. But
absolutely.
Obviously, we're not prepared for it in the slightest.
That's because the governments just didn't take it seriously, you know.
But even before it started to happen, like there should be way more stuff in place in case something happens. And yeah, you know, like you said, everyone wants the cheap labor in China, in different countries. So even stuff that a world disaster does happen, like a pandemic, you can't even get essential medical equipment to your frontline workers, which is just unbelievable.
Yeah, I know.
And what I heard stories, I don't know if this has changed now, but there's been stories in like America and the UK how NHS workers and nurses and stuff, there's separate parts of the hospital for coronavirus patients and normal patients. And when they're in the suspected to not be infected side, they're not allowed to wear masks. And there's been stories of
that's
nurses,
simply because they haven't got enough.
Yeah, I think so.
And this goes back to sort of government planning. You know, you should have this kind of thing. There should be strategic stockpiles. You know, there's people who can work this kind of thing out. If there's a pandemic and we can't get it for so long, how much do we need? It's not rocket science to sort this out, but they just didn't, did they?
Yeah,
you know, there's obviously extra money that needs to be spent, but you know, they obviously didn't look at that. And going on to, I noticed a comment. Somebody says that after this is all over, lots of people won't buy Chinese goods. Well, yeah, maybe lots of people would think they don't want to buy Chinese goods, but in reality, that's not going to happen. You know, over the last 10 years. So many foreign companies have come to China to get their manufacturing done. And that wasn't because they couldn't do it in their own country, but many of these corporations just saw bigger profits for their shareholders. China never forced any of these companies to come and manufacture it. They did that completely off their own back. But due to that, China have built up a massive logistics infrastructure and a massive supply chain infrastructure, which would actually take, you know, I hear many people say, you know, everybody will go to Vietnam, or everybody will go to Bangladesh, or everybody will go to India, you know, or back to America. You know, Trump keeps saying, all the jobs and the business will come back to America. That just ain't going to happen. I remember Apple tried to manufacture one of their products in America, and they had so many quality issues. They closed that down. They may be looking at reopening that now, I've heard. But they just couldn't do it. You know, they've got manufacturing so good here in China that it would be very, very difficult for companies to move back. And also, not only that, you know, take, for instance, LCD panels for TVs. You'd have to spend billions of dollars just to set up one plant. You know, nobody's going to make that investment to then produce a product that ultimately costs more because it's being manufactured in America. You know, it's just not going to happen.
Yeah, I've got a point to this. Is like, people like to think that they would support, you know, companies that are making products there in their own country. And, you know, some people do. But it comes down to your personal finances most of the time. You know, money does the talking. An example of this is, in England, they have the choice for slightly more expensive milk to support the farmers, as the farmers don't get a good cut. Still, tons of people, you know, way more people are buying the cheaper one just because it's 5% cheaper, because, you know, money's tight for most people. My example here is, for me, even personally, you know what happened with Luckin Coffee here recently. Look, it doesn't make me feel that good to support a company now, you know, that fabricated their figures and is going to affect a lot of Western companies deciding to invest in Chinese companies now. Yeah, that's true. But when you've got Starbucks as the other option, which is 3 times more expensive, I'm still going to buy Luckin Coffee because it's that much cheaper. That I don't. I
just want to say something here about Starbucks. You see, and this is a point where foreign companies will try and profiteer. You see, in China. So, if you compare I don't know, let's say a venti latte in England to a venti latte in China, it is more expensive in China. Okay. Now, why is that? Why is it more expensive in China? The labor costs, right? It probably costs per employee in China a third of what it does in the UK. So Starbucks are just saying, oh, we can make a bigger profit out of the Chinese market.
Yeah.
You know, technically, and if you then factor that in with the average salary of a Chinese person, so you know, the average English person will probably make enough to buy a Starbucks in about 20 minutes in an average paid job. A Chinese average paid person, that will be almost an hour's salary.
Yeah.
So you could argue it's almost 3 or 4 times more expensive because of the relativeness to the salary. Yeah. But you see, that just shows me where a foreign company is taking advantage. And the reason is that they say, oh, coffee in the Chinese market is seen as a bit more of a premium thing. It's like a sort of the richer people go there. Another example of this, right? You look on airfares, you can go on you can look at a flight, London to Shanghai return, book it in the UK, it might be 500. You book that exact same flight from Shanghai to London return, it could be 200, 300 pounds more in some cases, because they say, oh, the Chinese that travel, they've got more money, so we can make more money out of them.
That's like that. You can use a VPN to go through, poorer countries, and then use that same book that same flight, and it'll be cheaper. And that's just similar to what you just said.
Yeah.
I just want to go to a couple of super chats here because we've got Shao Sinran. Thank you for your donation there. What do you guys think about US's claim of moving their companies out of China?
I just talked about that. I think it's wishful thinking, to be honest. I just don't think it's going to happen. I think what you've got to realize in China is that a lot of companies that manufacture the cheaper end of products were moving out anyway. And the example I'll give of this is about 25 years ago, I was involved in a business in the UK, and we were buying lots of cheap plastic items, and we were buying those from Taiwan. And then all those cheap plastic items moved to China, and Taiwan started doing more high-tech stuff. Well, exactly the same thing now is happening here in China, where a lot of the factories that manufacture those very cheap clothes or cheap shoes or cheap plastic goods, they're moving to places like Vietnam, Bangladesh, and they're being replaced here in China by factories that are making more high-tech things like drones and phones and things like that. So it's just a natural progression. So as part of that natural progression, there were a lot of companies moving their manufacturing sort of out to China. Because what you've got to realize, over the last 10 years, that the salary of a factory worker has probably gone up 3 or 4 times in China. So now it's much cheaper to employ people in Bangladesh. So if you're manufacturing things that are very cheap, it's just not cost effective to do that in China anymore.
Okay, so Arthur Wong, Wuhan reports 1,300 retroactive cases equals lies. US reports equals honest. Can you guys comment on the double standard? Thanks for a Canadian-born citizen. Thank you, Arthur Wong.
Thank you, Arthur. I think, do you want to take this one?
I'll be honest, I didn't really take it in. Go on.
Okay, so, I think what happened, and we briefly spoke about this earlier, is at the time of the peak in China, they were only reporting cases that of people died in hospital. They weren't counting people who died in their homes because they just didn't have that reporting structure in place. And once the sort of hysteria over the peak has calmed down, they've now had more time to reassess. They've looked at people who've died in their homes. So, that person died of coronavirus. So they've added that to the tally. And I believe that the death numbers have increased by about 50%. But what I do see now, China got lashed by the Western media over that. But I see that exactly the same thing now is happening in the West. And I've read reports, in the recent days that there could be up to 5,000 unreported deaths in nursing homes in the UK and the US too. You know, it seems as though because there's a lot of old people in nursing homes and care homes, and the virus being introduced, it's killing a lot of people in those homes. And yet a lot of those are going unreported. But you can understand why. It's simply because they just don't have the reporting structures in place to do that, and neither did they here.
I really think I can't for my life get my head around why people get so tied up in this numbers thing. Like, it's almost like people forget that there's millions of people worldwide that are suffering and just like don't even think of it and just think, numbers. It's like, I can't believe people get so caught up in it. It's like, it does confuse me.
I can't understand why somebody who's in the UK or the US is so concerned with how many people died in China.
Yeah, when what's happening in their own country.
Concentrate on what's happening in your own country. You know, I think it's unbelievable as well when I see, we've spoke about this before, but when they had the lockdowns here, it was really adhered to. You know, we went out a couple of times, didn't we? We did some videos, and there was literally nobody around. I have one video that you did, like, you know, Shenzhen is a ghost town. It literally was.
Yeah.
You know, there was virtually nobody on essential personnel out and about. Yeah, in the UK, even though
let's just say as well, there was no actual enforced isolation here. That was just people.
There was in some sort of more rural areas.
I mean in Shenzhen. It was just people just did it by
voluntarily.
Their own back. Yeah.
But in the UK, even though they're up to reporting 15,000 deaths, people are still out there mixing and kind of grouping together. I just find that absolutely mad.
Yeah, it's really strange.
I just can't get my head around that.
People are going like, oh, I wonder when it's all going to go back to normal. I wonder when it's going to go back to normal. As if like there's just going to be a day where, bam, you know, the switch is flicked and, you know, we can all go back to doing whatever we want. Yeah. This is going to change a lot of people's minds about life in general.
Yeah, I think it is.
It's gonna really sort of affect the way people go about their daily lives. More, I'd say probably more so here, noticeably, because a lot more people are going to be nervous. You know, you saw that after the SARS thing, and people will be wearing masks for months and years now.
You know, you look at before this started here in China, probably 10% of people wore masks. You'd see it on a daily basis, and that goes back to the SARS outbreak many years ago.
Yeah, that's without even, you know, any pandemic.
I reckon there's going to be a good 70 to 80% of people who still wear masks
for a while,
years after. You know, for another couple of years at least. And I think there'll be a change in the way people think. I think masks will become a thing. And what I find interesting, I think there'll be companies out there. So now everybody just wears the sort of standard. I think there'll be a lot of companies that'll start up making masks that coordinate with outfits and stuff, because I think it will be almost like a piece of an accessory to your clothing.
Yeah, what you're going to wear without thinking about it. Just an interesting one that's come in from Art Larson. Thank you very much. In China, do you hear the US and UK authoritarian enforcement stories? No.
No, because they tend not to be pushed by the media so much. You know, I remember a sort of incident here where they were barricading somebody into an apartment here in China. And it went absolutely viral on social media all around the West. Oh, look, they're barricading everybody into their apartments. But again, this is what I spoke about context. It turns out that person had disobeyed the restrictions time and time again. So how were they supposed to stop him? They either take them into a government custody, which I believe at the time they didn't have the facilities for, or they barricaded them into their home. But this was probably a very, you know, it's probably a very few cases. But the West get off. It's like, oh, it's everybody in China's being barricaded into their homes, which is absolutely not the case.
I was speaking to my friend from the UK yesterday, and just like, how's life going back home with the virus going on? And he was shocked when I said that. He basically asked me, he said, oh, when lockdown restrictions got lifted in Shenzhen, how was it? And I was like, we never had lockdown restrictions.
Yeah.
And he was like, what do you mean? Like, from the media, it seemed like everyone's, locked in their apartments. Yeah. I'm like, no. That's obviously the picture that gets portrayed.
I do have two friends.
Just a quick thank you to Tang Lui there for the super sticker.
Appreciate that. I do have two friends who are from Hubei province. One was actually in the next city to Wuhan, Huanggang, which was also quite badly hit. And the restrictions there were that they were not allowed out of their houses. It was, she's in a small community, but they were not allowed out of their houses.
Yeah.
But what she told me was that obviously everybody has WeChat. So what the authorities did, they designated some community members that were allowed to leave their homes. And if you wanted anything from a store, you had to WeChat to that community representative by a certain day or a certain time each day. And they were designated that they were allowed to go to the store, buy all that things for you, and then deliver it to your home. But they were not actually, they were forbidden from leaving their homes for quite some time. But they all abided by that. They understood the reason.
Yeah, they didn't try. Yeah, well, there might have been a few people, but I've not heard. And knowing about the Chinese way of thinking, I don't think there would have been many people that try to, break those rules, because that's what it is. They think of things much more on a saving the nation. This is not just for me. This is for the better of the country. They think of it on much more of that level,
less than people, selfish level,
than people do back home. And when it's something like this, which is, it is to help the nation, it's to help you, to help your community, to help your family, your nation, the world, all of those things. But still, some people just can't get that into their heads. It's really strange. It's just,
I think that these people who are going out and against the advice in Western countries are just selfish, really.
Oh, unbelievably.
Because it's not just themselves. And something that's interesting, there's a couple of countries, I can't remember one of them, but one of them is Germany now. Germany have got it a lot more under control than any other European country. That's because they went massive testing very early on and quarantining. But what they've started doing now is running tests with antibody testing.
Mm-hmm.
And they've actually found that a lot more people have had it and had pretty much no symptoms at all. Because they're finding antibodies in a lot more people now. I can't remember the other country. Maybe somebody in the comments can sort of put that. But that's quite interesting. So actually a lot of people are getting it without knowing. But then they can give it to somebody
that it's really going to affect.
That is really going to be affected.
This is the craziest thing about this virus. It's like it's not even just as simple as, oh, kids are safe, old people are not. It's like some old people are bouncing it off like it's no problem, and some kids are dying. It's like,
well, there seems to be something. There's a big factor with other underlying conditions, and one of the ones that's sort of come out research in the UK is if you have underlying heart condition. This is massively affecting how much the virus can affect you if you're somebody with an underlying heart condition. So this is where I think these people are selfish. There's a lot of people with the heart conditions, and they're not thinking. All they're thinking about is themselves. And we've seen from the figures in hospitals, it isn't just old people. There was a woman, I think, in the UK, 106, who's
I don't know.
Recovered, and yet there's people who are like in their 30s who've died.
So there was a guy that I read about that he's like 40 odd, absolutely jacked figure, really healthy, ate great, and he died from it. It's like doesn't when you, this is the thing, you think, oh, young people are okay, old people are not. When you look at these outliers and think, oh God, this is something different. This is really not as straightforward as we thought. And it seems that you're getting mutations in different countries. And I read something about, like, in previous viruses, it does tend to mutate to a less not a strong sort of mutation, so eventually it starts to wean out. As well as that, you are increasing your medical knowledge about it and what works well to treat it and stuff. But again,
this is why that sort of research that's happening in Germany, this antibody testing, is quite interesting.
Yeah, they want to take blood from people.
No, that's the plasma treatment, but this where they're finding a lot of antibodies in people who didn't even know they had it. Yeah. Because I personally think that they'll either come up with a vaccine, but because of some various strains they're finding, this might just become like another flu worldwide.
I would
ultimately,
imagine so.
Because ultimately people either develop antibodies, or obviously the vaccine will give them those antibodies. But I think that is quite an interesting thing, that they see in so many people who've got antibodies who had no idea they even had it.
Yeah, it's really strange.
I think there's more research needs to be done on why it's affecting. It seems it's affecting some people and they're getting just like a runny nose or a bit of a sniffle or a sore throat, and yet other people are ending up in intensive care, which in a sense is similar to the flu, really. It's more of older and people with underlying health conditions.
Yeah, at this point, especially in China, excuse me, people should just be just as worried about getting the normal flu now. Actually going back to the I wouldn't say discrimination, but I'm walking around a lot more aware now of what others are thinking about me, and I hate it because I hear these stories and stuff, and I get on the metro and people walk away from me and stuff, and obviously it doesn't feel good. I talk about this in the video that I'm about to make. It's like, obviously it doesn't make you feel good, but when you try and just understand it and think, actually it just comes down to ignorance. In their head, they are just
ignorance and fear.
Yeah, ignorance and fear. And in their head, all they're doing is, oh, I think this person in front of me is, they are racially profiling me, but they're saying, I think this person in front of me is more likely to be infected. Therefore, I'm going to mitigate that risk by moving away from them. That's it. And if you look at it from that side, like, fair enough. I
suppose we are experiencing the feeling that many Chinese have experienced for the last many months abroad.
For sure. Yeah.
I know of I have a Chinese friend in the UK, and her friend was walking with an English girl, Chinese girl and English girl together, and some people started abusing her Chinese friend, and she stuck up for it, and they beat her up.
That's unbelievable.
And I just can't get my head around that. I mean, I've not seen, I've not experienced, like you, I've experienced where people just sort of edge away. Not everybody, but people do edge away. But I've never had anybody shout anything on that. No, however, I do have a friend in Zhaoqing who was at a bus stop, and apparently some Chinese people says, "Oh, foreigner, keep away." But I've not experienced any of that.
Most likely, we are in Shenzhen, so it's one of the places where it's much less likely to happen than some other cities.
I think the big cities in China, they're much more used to foreigners.
Definitely,
and they have been for many years. Whereas in smaller cities, third, fourth tier cities, they just don't see that many foreigners. So the fear level is higher because of what's been spreading on social media.
Yeah, well, one thing I like to try and do is just try and understand why things are happening, not to excuse it. So you can still, have your opinion on it, but just try to understand why it's happening. And when you think, I think China's been open to foreigners since 1978 or something like that. It's not even 50 years.
Yeah.
And of course, these things, there's a lot of older people, older generations who, when they were young, there wasn't one foreigner in their country. It's like, you can understand why, and most of your morals, they are built from when you're a young kid and when you're growing up. So you can see why this is instilled in their way of thinking.
That's right.
So obviously, look, it doesn't excuse it, but it's just, obviously these things are going to develop over time. You even see it with the younger generations already. It's very different to the older ones.
Okay, so Trevor Norman, do you find the Chinese people as friendly now as they were before the virus? Last time I went to see my in-laws, everyone was so great. Personally, yes, I do. And even though I've just mentioned that some people will move away from you on the metro, there's others that don't. And I've actually had conversations with people on the metro, and they're fine.
Yeah, I've had conversations with people without even a mask on as well. So the majority of people are absolutely.
Yeah, I do. I mean, as a foreigner in China, as a guest here, really, I do find generally people are very, very friendly and helpful.
Oh yeah, I've really hospitable.
Ever had a sort of bad experience in that sense, really. You know, I know some people have, but personally, I haven't. And also, we have a
Art Larson. Thank you for that. Santa Clara County COVID-19 cases should be 50 to 85 times higher than reported. Stanford study finds, the Stanford Daily.
Yeah, I think this is something that's all over the place. As I just mentioned, Germany are doing these antibody tests, and they're actually finding a lot of people with antibodies, which suggests they have had the disease. Luckily, that it seems as though a majority of people who get it have very, very mild symptoms. And it seems as though some don't even know they've got it or had it. So I think this probably, it's one of the reasons why it is a lot more widespread than people know. And obviously, you're only going to know if you've got it if you tested for sure.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And I think this is something where and I keep mentioning Germany, but you read all the reports and they've been massively on top of the test. I mean, the UK is about 20th out of the European countries for the amount of testing they've done. And if going back again, if you look at the WHO, the World Health Organization guidelines, they suggest the best way to bring this under control is test, isolate, and that's what Germany have done, where a lot of other European countries haven't done anywhere near the level of testing. It appears to me the German government were much better prepared than many other European countries for this. Now, if there's any Germans watching, it'd be interesting to know what your thoughts are on that. But from what I read and what I see, it appears that many European countries were asleep at the wheel, where Germany were sort of much more on top of the situation. And you can see that by the numbers, the numbers are the facts, basically.
This is, obviously an unprecedented time that we're living in. A lot of countries are taking measures that they haven't made, either in the history of their country or for a considerable amount of decades. It's like, it's so strange to be caught in the middle of it, and everyone's kind of figuring out what to do and how they're going to deal with this and that situation. So many people's minds are probably clouded by all the problems that they're going through right now with their, with their small business, with how they're going to pay this and that. And it goes up the chain, doesn't it? You've got the person who's renting a house, how am I going to pay my rent? And then you've got the person the landlord who's thinking, I know they're going to struggle to pay the rent. How am I going to pay my mortgage? And then if the problem gets up to the banks, it's like, we're living in a movie at the moment. We are actually living. There's going to be a lot of documentaries, films made about this exact time that we're living right now.
I just want to pick up on something Thomas M said here. I mean, NYC and disappointingly how scarce the testing is here now. This is very interesting because I've seen statements by your president on numerous occasions saying, "Oh, the testing's no problem. Everybody who wants a test will get a test." And I know NYC, New York, has been very, very badly hit by this. And obviously, your president's already talking about opening things back up, which one I find a bit strange because he doesn't have the power to do that. It's down to individual governors of states. But, you look at Florida and they seem raring to go to open back up. And if you look at all the advice is you can only open back up when you have extensive testing, so you can quarantine the people. If you've only got, say, a very few cases in your community and then you open things back up, that can quickly spread. But if you're on top of the testing and you can find those people, quarantine them, you can stop the community spread. So I do think it's absolutely crazy that you have a president. Obviously, it's apparent that he's more interested in his election and the economy, because his whole sort of measure of how good he's believed himself to be as president has been on the growth of the stock market. That's his sort of one thing he focuses on all the time. So obviously this has just completely knocked that sideways. So first of all, he started then to blame China, and now he's gone on to blaming the WHO. And again, something that is just unbelievable, that at the time when the WHO need as much funding as they possibly can,
they stop funding.
The president of the US, their biggest funder, has gone, I'm going to stop funding, because he feels as though the WHO are not pandering to the US. He feels as though they've pandered to China, and I just can't believe that. And I see that somebody, Bill Gates, has stepped up to the plate to some respect, and he's pledged another $150 million from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation to the WHO. But I just think now is not the time to be making stupid moves like that, because this coronavirus has ravaged the West, and God only help us when it takes hold in Africa, because there's no way they've got the healthcare infrastructure to deal with it. It obviously is, but the WHO predicting that there could be literally hundreds of thousands of deaths in Africa because they just don't have the health infrastructure to cope with it. The infrastructure in the West have been massively overwhelmed.
Yeah.
And they're way better than what's in most African nations.
Yeah,
so this is just going to be,
I see some
people crazy.
I see some people from China. I speak to them, and they are confused when I say, "Oh, look, the UK, the US aren't able to deal with it that well," and they're like, "What? I thought these were developed countries," and I'm like, "They are, but when it comes to things like this, no country really is prepared for this kind of devastation." In China, they're able to bring. They've got such a big. They've got an amazing amount of land, and they've got an amazing amount of people that they can bring in people from less affected areas to help out, build hospitals, things like that. In these, Western countries, they just don't have the manpower to be able to do that.
No, I think this is, they did a good job in the UK with making some temporary hospitals in London at the Excel Centre, Birmingham. I think it was at the NEC. But they don't have, because China's so big, they were able to fly in massive amounts of healthcare workers.
Exactly.
I just want to mention something, because this keeps cropping up a lot in the West, about China didn't try to hide things. Now, I will eventually do a video about the timeline of this. And there's a lot of talk about the doctor who sort of alerted friends in his group and that he was arrested and silenced and that. Now, from all that I've read, and I've read a lot, he was reprimanded. He wasn't arrested. He was kind of cautioned, because at the time, and he didn't know at the time, there was already an investigation going on by the authorities into this. They'd seen some cases. This is a bit strange. It's something we haven't seen before. And there was an ongoing investigation into looking more into what it was. But many Westerners are going, why didn't China close everything down and stop it from? Because at that point in time, they didn't have all the facts. Now, you can't go closing down a whole province with 60 million people on a handful of cases of a new. There was no sort of knowledge that there was person-to-person transmission at that case. At that time, they thought people had picked it up from the wet market, which now seems that may have not been the case. But it's always easy to look back.
Hindsight's
a great thing. But at that time, there was an investigation going on. They didn't want to alarm the public to panic, which is, in my eyes, is a sensible move.
That seems to be what everyone's doing, not just China, really.
At the point, the investigation, they had got one of the best epidemiologists involved, Zhongnan Shan. Once they'd established there was clear person-to-person contact, 2 days later, they shut down Wuhan city. And a few days after that, they closed down Hubei. Now, if you compare that, it's easy to compare to the perfect scenario. The perfect scenario would be, we have all this information, we have it straight away. But they were dealing with something that they'd never seen before.
Yeah, it's a novel virus.
The clues in the name, novel. They were dealing with something they'd never seen before, and there was ongoing investigations. As soon as they had the results from those investigations, they acted very, very quickly. Now, if you compare that to the perfect scenario, you would argue they didn't act quick enough. If you compare that to something like the H1N1, they acted extremely quickly in comparison.
Way quicker.
So, I think it's very unfair. There may have been failings, but
again, it comes down to ignorance. People don't know the facts about the previous pandemics, so they just hear what the Western media pushes to them that, they didn't act quick enough, so they jump on that bandwagon. Oh, obviously they didn't act quick enough. I just want to move on. We've got a few super chats that come in here. China Teacher Brand, thank you very much. Would you ever have meetups with followers in Shenzhen? That's an interesting one. We've never even discussed that. Obviously, at this time, it's probably not really ideal to be doing it. No, I don't mean that. I mean, because of the virus situation. There's a couple of people that have recognized us so far. I mean, it would be great. I'm sure there's
I just got a little story about it. I was lucky enough to be treated to lunch at St. Regis yesterday. It's a very nice hotel here in Shenzhen. And it was basically because of the virus, their business has been really, so they did a special offer, and it was almost half price. And I was there, and I went to get my dessert, and there's a guy there. He goes, "I think I recognize you."
Really?
I says, "Oh, I'm not sure." He says, "Yeah, you're the guy that does that YouTube channel." He says, "I'm one of your followers." And it's the first time I've been recognized in Shenzhen. So
it would be
it
would be good. I mean, obviously at this time with the virus, it might be better to wait a little bit.
Sure.
But we would definitely be up for doing that in the future. JL really Chen, we've got one in. I can't highlight that for some reason. Sorry. Oh, there we go. People in the West might say you are just propaganda from CCP. All you said are untruths. How would you prove and defend your opinion?
I don't think we need to prove and defend it.
I don't think we do.
We just say what we see.
Yeah, exactly. So there's always going to be those people.
And, at the end of the day, people can either believe what they read in the Western media, which is, time and time again is from what I see is not always the truth, and they twist the truth, or they can choose to believe somebody who lives here and sees it with their own eyes. But I think you've always got that thing, however much you tell people what you see, they're still not going to believe you. People will believe what they want to believe. That is always how it is. One thing I like to just hammer home, I'm just going to say thank you to Kevin Cho for the super sticker, and Eric NG for the super sticker as well. I appreciate that. One thing I like to hammer home about this is that we are now in China, right? So people, obviously they know we enjoy our lives here. So a lot of people, when we say positive things and they have a negative view about China, they just assume, you're just back in the country now because you live there and you like it. Obviously, if you were here, you would hate it as well, like we do. But you're just there and you like to back whatever. You're a CCP shill or whatever. It's because we're giving the other side of the story, aren't we? There's always two sides to an argument, and when you've got the Western media portraying one side, we're just giving the other side.
So a lot of people are just going to assume that we're just constantly backing China, whereas really we're just making it, we're just balancing it up.
Yeah, I think as well, you know, I'm
trying to balance it up.
The kind of person who likes to focus on positive. Every country in the world has positive and negative, yeah. And I could talk about negative things about China all day long. Of course, there's negative things.
Every country, yeah. You
There's
could talk
many
about
negative things about the US.
UK,
There's many negative things about Europe, but I don't want to speak about this. I think if you start focusing on negative things, you become negative yourself.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
And that's not the kind of thing. The other thing I'd like to say is everything you read, always fact check it yourself. Always look at both sides of an argument and make a decision on that. And bear in mind, a lot of news you'll see on social media is always taken out of context. You need to look at the context. You need to look at the whole context. It's very easy to judge something if you don't know the whole context. So that's something important.
Thomas M, thank you very much for the super sticker there. We will be probably finishing this up in the next sort of 10 minutes. So if you do have any questions, make sure to get them in.
Something I'd just like to mention, we are planning a sort of mid-week live chat, which we are hoping to go out. That is at a convenient time for our European viewers. We know now is really not a convenient time for European viewers. This is better for Asians and the US, but it's not so great for Europeans. So we are going to do something.
What we could do is put a poll up on the community post and just ask who would like to watch our live streams and see where most of the votes come in.
An interesting one.
But yeah, we want to have eventually. We want to have two.
Thank you for everybody who voted on our where we should go community poll. We had over 3,000 votes, which just blew my mind. That's great. The winner was actually Xinjiang, and we will plan to go there. However, right now it's not so easy to go to play. So we might choose a sort of closer location first, but we're definitely going to put Xinjiang on the plan to go, because we know a lot of Western media has a lot of negativeness about this, and we want to go and we want to film there to see what it's like. Yeah,
because I literally, I'd love to see what it's like myself. I don't really have much of a concept of what it's going to be like, and that's actually the case with a lot of parts of China. People, I've been to 4 out of 5 or 5 out of 6 of the first tier cities in China now, everywhere but Beijing. But that doesn't really give me a true representation of what the country is like, and I'm very aware of that. And I'm excited to, go into sort of more rural areas. I want to do Tibet. I want to do Inner Mongolia, and we can take some good camera equipment with us and take some drone shots. And we notice that a lot of you like to see the landscape, see the cities, because a lot of you might not have been here or might not plan to come here, but you want to see what it's like. So we noticed that a lot of people. So we're trying to show you places. I've just done the video that I've got coming up soon about the xenophobia and the discrimination thing. I've recorded some footage of me just biking around on my electric bike just around the area, and so people can sort of have some decent visuals.
So I just want to address a super chat here off Leatherlass B. Any news as to when China will rethink reopening the borders?
TEFL teacher here. Okay, I'm assuming they can't get back.
There's nothing that I've heard officially yet, but my thought is that once they start seeing countries getting it under control, they will slowly open up to those countries. Obviously, it's very within China's interest to open up travel again as soon as possible. But I think they want to make sure that other countries have it back under control, so they don't. It's a massive task for China, because so many people are inbound to China. It's a massive task for them to test and quarantine. So I think they're trying to lessen that burden to some extent. So what my feeling is that once they start to see individual countries getting it under control more, they will then start opening up
to those countries.
To those
do you think?
countries, yeah, that's what I think.
I really have no sort of take on that. I really don't know. It could be one way, it could be the other. It could be ages, it could be soon. I really don't know.
But there's been nothing official yet. But that's I would imagine they're as quite keen to safely open up
definitely
to traveling.
Yeah.
Obviously, the whole world is airlines and travel companies must be in absolute agony at the moment with the losses they're having to incur.
It's a crazy time. I've got friends from here, teachers and people in other jobs, foreign friends who have, they left China once this all started, and then now they can't come back. And I've got a friend stuck in Thailand, a friend stuck in Malaysia, a friend stuck in Ukraine. It's like, and they've just got to stay there and wait it out until they can come back in. And it's a shame, but I'm just glad that we decided not to leave.
Yeah,
definitely.
That was probably one of the better decisions that we made.
Definitely, because obviously we now, if we catch it, we're able to get treatment for free, and a lot of the people, all the people coming in have to pay for it, and not only that, they have to pay for their own quarantine in a hotel when they come back in. So yeah, it's going to be a bit costly for them, and also what they've got to pay to stay out of China. But anyway, I think we should wrap this up now. This has been extremely successful. Obviously, the audio and the visual is much better. The quality is much better. So yeah, I hope you all enjoyed.
Everybody joining us. That was great. Thank you very, very much to all you people.
Yeah, thank you everyone for joining, and we will be back next Sunday, Sunday China time at 10 a.m. same time next week, and maybe we'll have a second one up very shortly. As I said, we will put a community post up shortly to address the second live stream a week. And thank you all for joining. Take care. We'll see you in the next one.
Take care.